Yo, what is up guys? It is Bumfris, back with another episode of Entitled Parents. Today's episode is gonna be a banger and I know you're gonna love this one. Just like in yesterday's video, if we can hit 3,000 likes in the next 24 hours, the next episode of Entitled Parents I do will be at least 25 minutes long. So if you're excited for that, you've just got to smash the like button, then sit back, relax, and get annoyed at some entitled parents. Right off the bat, I just want to say that I love my mum. I really do. Ultimately though, she's human and isn't a perfect person. Neither am I, it's just, I don't have kids to project my imperfections and insecurities onto. I love my mum, but I also hope to be nothing like her when I have my own kids. This situation in particular really made me start to see her in a different light. The whole thing took place right after I'd just been broken up with. My ex left my house with a box of his things, and I was busy crying in my room. Eventually, I picked myself up off the floor and got right to work in de-relationshipping my room. I was tossing anything and everything that I got from him. Stuffed animals, letters, shirts, Polaroid pictures, everything went. I left my room with a black trash bag full of stuff that I was going to toss into our big trash bin outside. This is where my mum stops me and asks me if she can look through the bag to see if there was anything she wanted. And it was a no from me. That bag held memories of a guy that I wanted nothing to do with, and I didn't want to see any memorabilia from him around the house. It was important to me and to me being able to move on to get rid of anything that reminded me of him. Also, my mum is your typical nosy mum, so I figured that she also just wanted to snoop through everything. I didn't just tell her no though. I made her promise not to go through the bag once I've thrown it away. I thought maybe making her promise would be good as she's looked through my trash on multiple occasions. So she promises not to, and that's the end of that. Fast forward a couple of months and I'm at her workplace helping her clean up the office. I bend down to reach under her desk where I find papers, cans, and a pair of fuzzy slippers that I knew I threw away in that bag. I grab them and hold them up to her and she knows what she's done because she just laughs. She laughs and says they're comfortable. I laugh too because I'm at her workplace, but I was honestly so upset. It's not that the slippers were anything super important to me. It's that she promised not to go through the bag, but did anyway. It was a complete invasion of my privacy, and for what? She didn't know I had those slippers to begin with, so she was likely just snooping through the bag and looking at everything. It's like she put her personal gain and need to snoop over my feelings. And I don't know, it was and still is a very upsetting memory for me. Boring and long story I know, I just wanted to get this off my chest because I've held it in long enough. A story like this for me is actually really upsetting because it's not just somebody who's sharing a story about an entitled parent, it's someone who has a seriously entitled parent and has been affected by said entitled parent in obviously a pretty major way. It sounds like this entitled parent knows absolutely no boundaries and doesn't care about her own child's privacy, and as a result pulls stunts like this and quite frankly doesn't even seem like she cares. I guess at the end of the day, that's just an entitled parent for you, but a story like this to me just hits a little bit harder. My mother, who's going to be the entitled mum of our tale, grew up in a household that didn't believe in doctors or going to the hospital. This translated to an irrational fear of hospitals for my entitled mum. At the time of this story, I was 14 in high school and about to have a very bad day. I should start by saying that my entitled mum lives exactly 1 mile away from the closest emergency room. Also, my siblings and father were out of town for a competition that weekend, and I didn't feel like going to another cheerleading competition, so I stayed home. I get home from school on Friday around 4 p.m. and I call my entitled mum to tell her that I don't feel too well and think that I need to see a doctor. My entitled mum says that she has a 1-hour workout with her personal trainer who happens to train the whole family for our sports teams. My entitled mum tells me that she'll come home right after and take me to the pediatrician. So at 4:40 p.m, I call my entitled mum saying that something is seriously wrong with me and I really think that I need to go to the hospital. She tells me that the PT has just had a cancellation and that she's staying for another hour workout and then she'll take me to the doctor. 5:10 p.m. rolls around and I call my entitled mum and beg her to come home because I'm in a lot of pain and feel terrible. She gives the phone over to her personal trainer who says, and I crap you not, it sounds like a muscle cramp from our workout last week. You'll be fine, buddy. And then she says that she'll call our friendly neighbor across the street to check on me. 10 minutes later, I hear my friendly neighbor walk in through the door and come to my room to check me out. I'm on the floor because I fell after going to the bathroom and couldn't get up. She helps me into bed and immediately calls my entitled mum. And the conversation goes something like this. My friendly neighbor says, "Hey entitled mum, I think you need to get here as soon as possible. Your son is as white as a sheet and sweating bullets. Also, he is in so much pain that he can barely move." My entitled mum just responds, Oh, I'm sure he's fine, and he's probably just overreacting from a muscle cramp like the PT says. My friendly neighbor says, this isn't just a muscle cramp. He needs to see a doctor. I can put him in the car and meet you at the hospital that's only 1 mile away. My entitled mum says, there's no need for that. I'll finish up here and take him to the doctor, and hangs up. Then at 5:45 PM, my friendly neighbor calls my entitled mum again, and my entitled mum says that she's in a changing room and will be home in 10 minutes. After all, the gym is pretty close. 35 minutes pass and it's 6:20 PM and my entitled mum finally gets home. My friendly neighbor tells her what I've been going through and says that I need to go to the ER, and my entitled mum says that she's taking me to see our pediatrician. My entitled mum does take me to see our pediatrician, who also runs a pediatric ER. The problem is that the doctor's office is 25 minutes drive away with zero traffic, and we are at the butt end of rush hour. 7:15ish PM rolls around and we get to the pediatric ER and they immediately take me into the back to see what's wrong. Turns out, I have an acute appendicitis and it's close to bursting, so they need to send me over to the hospital that's 1 mile away from my house to get it removed. The entire time, my entitled mum is murmuring about needing to get ready for a trial the next day, as she is a divorce lawyer, and how I'll probably be fine and just need to sleep it off. Then, there comes a moment when my entitled mum is out of the room, but I have a doctor and a nurse in the room alone with me. I tell them the whole story about how I've been trying to get her to take me to the ER since 4, how we only lived a mile away from the hospital they wanted to send me to, but my entitled mum decided we go here because she hates big hospitals. The doctor didn't really believe me until I told him to MapQuest my address relative to the hospital. I managed to convince them to call for an ambulance so they could transport me to the hospital to make sure I got there. After my surgery, the nurse told me that my appendix burst as they began the surgery, so they had to be quick. To this day, I still tease the personal trainer every time I see him by grabbing my side and saying I think I have a muscle cramp. And I've never heard him use those words together since. You know, as you can imagine doing this series, and I think we're nearly 80 episodes into entitled parents, I've seen a lot of entitled parents who do some really entitled things and things that can potentially put other people in harm's way. But it's very, very rare to see an entitled parent who is so stubborn and so entitled that they're willing to put their own child's health at risk for their own ridiculous and selfish reasons. This type of entitled parent is not only the scariest type of entitled parent, but absolutely someone that I would never want to rely on in any kind of situation. This story was told to me by my little sister that was there when this happened. Sorry for any spelling mistakes, English isn't my native language. My aunt, who we're gonna call the entitled mum, who even fits the hairstyle perfectly, which also made us give her the nickname Mushroom, was visiting my grandparents a few years ago. At that time, my little sister, who was 12 at the time, was very sick and couldn't eat properly for months. Don't worry though, as she's all good now. The minute that my poor parents and her finally got out of the hospital, the first thing they did was visit my grandma's house for a good home-cooked meal. After all they had eaten was gross hospital food for so long, as they stayed with my little sister the whole time. My grandma was amazing as always, and she made a ton of burgers and tasty homemade food just for them. After so many months at the hospital without any decent sleep, as they were sleeping on chairs near my little sister, and without any normal meal nor a good bath, they finally could eat at home. They were just about to start eating when the entitled mum comes in and says, "What?" And my grandma says, "I made food for everyone. Sit down and..." The entitled mum cuts my grandma off, ignores her, and pointing at my little sister's burger says, "What is that? Why didn't you give my precious son so much meat like you give to that girl?" My dad just said, "There is so much of it. Here, do you want my piece?" The entitled mum, while looking menacingly at my dad, measured the 2 stupid pieces of meat in her eyes and then came at my grandma, saying, "After all that I've given to you, all I have done for you?" She pointed at my little sister's burger and then her 5 or 6-year-old child's burger and says, "You give my little prince less meat than them? When did they ever help you like me?" You probably know that she's entitled and lying by now. She gets money from the rest of the family to help my grandma and grandpa, and she is still taking things from their house in return. My mum and dad help my grandma and grandpa always and never ask for anything in return. My grandma says to the entitled mum, "Just sit there and eat. There is a lot of food. Do you want me to give your grandson another piece?" The entitled mum says, "No. How dare you give this girl more meat than my son after all that I have done for you?" At this point, she straight up took a fork, stuck it in my little sister's burger, and put it on her 5-year-old son's plate. My grandma got so mad that she started screaming, while my dad and my little sister were dying with laughter inside. We are pretty much used to the entitled mum in the family. In the end, the poor 5-year-old kid, of course, couldn't finish both huge burgers, and my granny gave my little sister another burger, because after all, there were so many left. My dad just laughed all the way home, so in a way, the entitled mum kinda cheered them up after being in the hospital for so long. Her being overly annoying crying because of a piece of meat that she then proceeded to steal the rest of it after lunch become a running gag in our family. See, this kind of entitled mum is back to your OG classic entitled mums, where they give you the whole "my son is so precious, my son is a prince" spiel, as if that makes them more important than everybody else in the room. Like, in a situation like this, you have to be pretty entitled to literally take food off somebody's plate when they've just spent the last few months of their life in hospital, and it's the first good meal that they've been able to eat in months, and yet somehow in your mind you think that this whole situation is a good idea. Like I've said 1,000 times before, I will never understand entitled parents, and quite frankly, I don't want to. So here's the story. I'm a piano teacher and had a new 16-year-old student who started midsummer. 2 weeks ago, entitled mum emails me from the car outside of the lesson stating that she would like her son to do competitions because her son's school does not offer any music and has very limited extracurricular activities. I let her know via email a little bit about what was out there, and I contacted the local piano guild chairman to make sure that they were even doing events this year. I let the entitled mum know that she needs to come sit in the lessons so we can go over her options. She proceeded to cancel the next 2 lessons, claiming that her son was sick, and then emailed again saying that she had put her entitled kid in a rock band because piano lessons are too much pressure. I reminded her that I did not recommend competition and she is the one who had insisted doing it. I told her that we can still have our private lessons and study any style that she wants, but she tried to lie and say that the time was bad despite having chosen it herself. Now, a flurry of emails later, the entitled mum quits piano altogether, claiming that the entitled kid is too busy with the rock band now. I guess I should count my blessings that I don't have to deal with him anymore. So what I can gather from this one at least, and I could be wrong, but the entitled mum tries to get her son to get into some kind of piano competition, and then in a complete 180 decides that a piano competition is too much pressure and it's all the fault of the person who is teaching the piano lessons and not her fault for trying to push him into something that he wasn't ready to do. I mean, to me, that sounds like some pretty entitled behavior. Trying to deflect and pass the blame onto everyone else, rather than accepting fault for their own poor actions, that to me is your classic entitled parent. My boyfriend just told me this story and I thought it belonged here. When he was 14, he was living with his mum and sister on a housing estate. It was summer and he liked a bit of light in his upstairs bedroom, so he left the curtains open at all times. That included when he was getting dressed and after having a shower. So if you purposefully stared at his window, you could only see him from his waist up. Well, their neighbours did not like that one bit. She went pounding on the door, yelling at my mother-in-law that her son was a disgrace, always hanging around indecently in front of his daughter who was the same age as him. My mother-in-law told her that he had every right to do whatever he wanted in his bedroom and that if they didn't want to see him, all they needed to do was not look. A couple of days went by and lo and behold, the police showed up at their door. Turned out, the neighbour had been filming and taking pictures of my boyfriend to show to their housing people as evidence of his wrongdoing to get them kicked out. Except, the only issue was that the housing office called the police on her for taking pictures and videos of my boyfriend, keeping in mind his age at the time, and as a result, kicked her and her family out. I mean, look, there's really not much that needs to be said about a story like this. It's pretty clear cut who's in the wrong. The entitled mum, going out of her way to cause trouble and make herself seem like the victim, ended up being the one on the crap end of the stick, and quite frankly, got exactly what she deserved. Honestly, I'd say she was just lucky that nobody pressed any charges. So one more story from my days as a youth pastor. So where I lived at the time would often drop below 0 during the winter. This is important to the story. Also, I'm a female and I've been blessed with curly hair, that if I don't put something like mousse in my hair, it will be a frizzy mess later on. My older sister was blessed with gorgeous curly hair that she basically doesn't have to do, but I do. So, one cold morning, I showed up to the church with my hair somewhat wet and it had mousse in it to make it curly. I was sitting at my desk getting ready for my workday, as in ready for the kids to show up to school and then go do my youth ministry duties. In walks entitled mum with her daughter after her to go and check in with her teacher and hang out with her friends. The entitled mum stops at my desk and looks annoyed. The entitled mum is stopped at my desk and is just staring at me. So, I look up and say to her, "Good morning, entitled mum, how are you?" The entitled mum responds, "You know when you come in here with wet hair, you are a bad influence on my daughter," and storms off. I whispered to myself, "Okay," and you know what I did? I still showed up with wet hair to church. Maybe I'm just not very smart, or perhaps I'm not just tuned into the mind of an entitled parent, but I can't quite see the correlation between somebody having wet hair and them being a bad influence on your daughter. Like, what did wet hair ever do to you? Did it make you grow up to be a horrible person seeing other people with wet hair? Is that what turned you into an entitled parent? Or is this just another way of you deflecting the fact that you're not a very good parent and you're trying to blame other people for the fact that your daughter isn't growing up the way you wanted her to? Either way, it's not going to matter, because like with every entitled parent, they're never going to realize they're entitled until it's too late. Alright everyone, that is that for today's episode of Entitled Parents. I just want to start off by saying thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy the video as much as I enjoyed making it, don't forget to smash that like button, and just a reminder that if we can hit 3,000 likes on this video in the next 24 hours, the next episode of Entitled Parents I upload will be at least 25 minutes long. I'm gonna keep this outro nice and short. I do just want to say though, if you are new around here, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. I love each and every single one of you, and I'll be doing something very special for you guys very soon. What you are going to see on your screen right now are 2 of my awesome videos, one of which I would highly suggest you click on and go down that rabbit hole of entitled parents. Otherwise though, I just want to say again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're all having a fantastic day, and I hope to see you guys tomorrow for another episode of Entitled Parents. Bye.